In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated, a grown-up podcast about gaming and nerd pop culture. On this podcast, we cough frequently and then we discuss video games, books, TV shows, movies, and board games. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Tom Sedlacek, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Today, we're discussing Dungeon Crawl Classics by Goodman Games, a new tabletop role-playing game that attempts to revisit the magic of advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Joining me for the discussion today are the Hobbybox, Joe Burns.
Heyo.
Dr. C, Casey Aline.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
And Munch Time, John Munch.
Magic missile.
Welcome back to the show, guys. Since we're discussing a tabletop RPG, I thought we'd start by establishing our nerd cred. Joey, Casey, and I play in a D&D 5th edition campaign. Let's go around the horn talking about our tabletop role-playing game experience and what we think, each one of us thinks, the secret sauces that makes these games so fun, starting with Casey.
I think the first time I played a tabletop RPG was in high school, like 8th or 9th grade, I want to say, and it was MERP, Middle Earth Role Playing, hosted by our friend Rogue Hippo. I was a dwarf, I believe, and we just kind of, if I remember right, I just kind of followed along with the Hobbit story, but you inputted your own characters into it. Did play after that, just some Star Wars one-offs, and then we played Shadowrun the one time at your house. That was for sure at your house, not my house.
I played Shadowrun all over the place. It could have been anywhere. We could have played Shadowrun on the moon.
Shadowrun was definitely at your house, at least when I played it, and that was the night where I stayed up like all night long because you guys already had characters, so I kind of jumped in and made the stealth troll that will live in infamy forever. And then after that, then it was Dungeons and Dragons. So that's kind of my journey so far.
I've known a lot of friends that play a lot of different role-playing games and a lot of different systems. You're the only one that I'm aware of that has stayed up all night to create a character, all night reading a rule book, because you came in like mid-campaign, stayed up all night, made your character, and then dominated the next day. So that's a pretty remarkable claim to fame there, Casey.
Yeah, I mean that's typical me. If you've listened to me on this podcast, is that if I'm doing anything, I want to do it right, and then I'm gonna min-max out of it. So
we'll see how your min-maxing went in advanced Dungeon Crawl Classics here. John, what about you, my friend?
So I've played all kinds of TTRPGs over the years, right? I played a ton in high school, from starting, I think, with D&D. I played Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf. There was, I think it was Heroes Unlimited. It was some sort of like superhero game where, you got to roll, where the character creation was like one of the funnest parts, because you were rolling, 2d10s for like 100% chance to like get different like level powers. So like lots of fun there. I even played like some just custom homebrew systems that like some friends of mine threw together. So tons of different things over like just really like from like 7th grade to like, all through college. I think though, like D&D still is just my favorite, right? I think it's just, I love that setting, read the books, love everything about it, right? And just like my 2nd edition handbook sits on my shelf, right? All battered and beaten. So it has my original characters like in the handbook where they always live. So like, that's always going to be my favorite. I think though, like what was always like brought me back to it, why I always had fun, was really just, it was creative scenarios and like really good friends to play them with. Like from, I remember like it was really weird in high school. Like I played D&D with like the other people who I played football with. So it was like this completely like, you wouldn't think that like these, football players in like deep South Mississippi were playing D&D, but like we were playing it like on like the away game bus, and like we had a DM who was running basically 2 campaigns because we were 2 warring armies that were fighting against each other, and it was just like this epic battle that we were doing like on the bus to the football game. So like just really fun things that stick in your mind and your memory to make a good campaign and a good time.
Yeah, I used to play D&D with the Homecoming King. So, Casey, was that just a part of the Mora culture too? Was you guys playing D&D on the bus, you and Patrick and the Methvins and God knows who else? Maybe a Kaiser?
No, absolutely not. I did get Kaiser and McBroom and some of the guys to play Risk. That was about as nerdy as we got with that group. But yeah, no. Pat for Homecoming King was he's well rounded for sure, and but he was a good DM, and I didn't comment on that. I think like as far as all my role playing experiences go, I think what makes it good is having a DM that knows what they're doing and is able to craft that story and keep it going and keep everybody involved. But then beyond that, I think the next most important thing is having that group of friends that are good, fun people to be around, but also that are actually able to continue playing. Right? Like, it kind of sucks that if you start it up, you put all that time into character creation, and then you're able to play one time, right? I mean, that's not the point. You want to try to be able to continue your adventures.
I can think of one game that would be a great fit for like a one-time, one-off adventure where you just roll up some characters and then walk away from it. But we'll get there a little bit later. Bernsey, we all rely on you to be our DM now. Like you're running this game, you run our D&D campaign. I know you DM another campaign. So like, have you been playing role-playing games like your entire life or what?
No, I actually didn't play a tabletop role-playing game until I was in my 30s. So not until I think it was 2014 or 2015 that I played. It was just one of those things where I was always interested, but never really had a mechanism like in high school or even college where it popped up that someone was playing and I could jump in and roll a character or anything like that. My experience is also abnormal, kind of like you referred to, in that I have probably, I mean, I've played a lot of D&D. I've kind of made up for lost time in that case because I have an online game that I've been playing in now for, oh yeah, it would be 7-ish years now at this point, and we're on like our third campaign now in that. But yeah, it's been from with mostly the same group. There's a couple people that rotated out, but it feels like at least a lot more of my experience of games that I've played has been actually DMing. And really, I'd only played 2 games of or what, it was probably 3 or 4 games of Pathfinder until I played D&D and had to run and DM a campaign with 7 other players. And so that was an experience to have to be the source of truth about like rules and all that stuff in a game that I hadn't played. um, but yeah, so I've it's probably balanced out just because of how consistent the group I'm in of where I'm just playing and not DMing. But a lot of my early experience with D&D was just DMing stuff. It's been really just 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons that I've run, and 5.5e, which is what they're calling 2024 now. Those are like the main things that I've played, but I've also ran like 4 sessions of a Star Wars campaign that fizzled out. And then I've read a bit of some other systems. And then, yeah, like I said, I played a few games of Pathfinder First Edition, which is basically just the continuation of 3.5e D&D. And I've played some one-shots in like Monster of the Week, Only War, Kids on Bikes, and the Star Wars RPG. So that's like my experience with role-playing.
You were a bit of a late bloomer, but you're making up for lost time. We got the sports nerd, John Munch. We got Mr. Min-Maxer, Dr. C. I took a similar gateway into you, Burns. Like, I didn't know anyone that played, but like, I bought the DM's guide in high school. And I just started running. So like, I started running campaigns before I played campaigns, which not the best experience for anyone involved, but like that was the D&D experience that we had until we went to college, meet more people, find better DMs, and run a campaign where you play once every 6 months. Good times. I've dabbled with a lot of different systems, including 3 different editions of D&D. Shadowrun, which is probably my favorite tabletop role-playing game. I played 2 different Lord of the Rings games, 1 Star Wars game, and the Savage Lands where we played in the Weird West. What I think the keys to the secret sauce are small party sizes and morally ambiguous groups. So small party sizes, like to me, there's nothing worse in like a tabletop role playing game where there's too many players at the table because like turns take forever. I played in a game with our friend Mike, OiO co-host Mike Mathwig, and like we had seven. I was either the 6th or 7th person into that campaign, and like Mike and I essentially had the same characters, just different names, and like so like we were both trying to investigate and be like these detective dudes, and like it was a lot of overlap, and like someone's always sitting around bored at that point, and that sucks. So like I'm a big fan of keeping the party size small, and I think the morally ambiguous group is absolutely essential. Like it is hard to play, from my experience, it's hard to play heroes in a role play game, like straight up Paragon type paladin bound by law heroes. I am an agent of chaos and I accept and acknowledge that. And like I like to have a framework with which to create chaos inside.
I was gonna say, so is that just because of how you approach games, or is that from like, that's the law because that's just what works best with everybody?
Well, let's do a quick straw poll, Burns, here. So like, do you guys want to follow every rule, do every quest like morally the right way, or like do you want to go in and just like take what this world has to offer? Like John, Casey, Joey, like are we all paragons of virtue here or what?
I think, Tom, you're wrong. Right?
Agree vehemently.
Well, hold on. Let me rephrase that. You're right. You need to have chaos, or you need to have, maybe not chaos, but you need to have discord to make for a good like campaign. If everybody is lawful good, it's boring. If everybody is chaotic evil and just being jerks to everyone and killing and polluting and plundering, it's boring. It's when you have the paladin and like the rogue that are on morally different grounds, and like the rogue is trying to steal something and he has to do it sneakily so the paladin doesn't see, because then the paladin's gonna have to holy smite him, or the paladin sees and the paladin has to make that choice to let his friend live or die and maybe lose his sponsorship or whatever it is from his god. Right now he's a fallen paladin, and then you have a quest for him to regain his connection to like those are the things that make for a great campaign. So Tom, you're required, the chaotic guy, the person that's gonna like just jump in head first, because that's required. I tend to play chaotic good, right? My go-to is always like a chaotic good ranger, right? I always, for whatever reason, that's what I always just kind of stuck with. And it's, it's like I'm going to do whatever I want, but it's for the good of the people, right? So I can look the other way when Tom does something stupid or crazy or horrible.
Never do anything stupid.
Right. But it builds a better story, right? No movie or book you read, right, it's just all good guys or just all bad guys, right? Read the Dragon's Lance novels if you want a really good like that's a good homogenization of like that's a great party because everybody has their own different alignment that they want to go for.
That might be the first time that Weiss and Hickman have ever been referenced on the show. I appreciate the reference, John. Good stuff. Casey, Mr. Min-Maxer, like you want us all moving in a lawful good direction, or do you enjoy the way that I approach life?
I basically just would repeat every single thing that John just said. So it's for
let's
me.
see if you can remember it all, dude.
Yeah, Tom, no, wrong. That was the first thing. And then
I know for me personally, it just depends like on what type of character I want to play. Like I don't want to play the same character every single time. So if I want to be a paladin, I'm going to try to stick to the good side. If I want to be, a dark elf or something, I don't know, like something where you're maybe just a little bit more chaotic, than I would play that way. But I don't try to stick to the same thing every single time, but when I do play it, I'm gonna play it to the best of my ability and try to make it awesome.
Moral ambiguity for the win.
But do you pick your alignment based upon min-maxing the character that you're building?
Probably, yes. If
Yeah.
it's gonna give me
Right.
any sort of advantage, absolutely.
I'm
It's
gonna
cute that you had to
be
think about that.
XYZ, and you know what? I get a +2 to this skill if I am, this alignment. So I'm gonna go that way.
Exactly.
See, so ultimately, I mean, I'll agree with everybody in that, and it's probably a little bit more like what John was saying, in that I think you need those sort of you need those sort of opposing ideas sometimes in a group, because that's what helps to create the stories that can pop up. I think that's the biggest thing that I agree with, is that the DM isn't creating the story. The DM is setting up a framework so that the characters can and the group as a whole can create the story. The DM has a role in that, and they sort of set up the structure that then the players can go in and play around in. And they will move things in the direction it needs to go to get to the next set of encounters or the next like plot points that need to happen. But some of the most fun that I've had as a DM is when things go like completely outside of the setup of what was supposed to happen, because that's how a character has developed. The story I think I've told before on the podcast was, in the first campaign that I ran, one of the characters was a half drow, and their character was a druid, and the whole setup it was the Lost Mine of Fandelver, which you guys played a little bit of.
Casey's favorite.
Yeah, and the whole setup of that is that there's this black spider, which is sort of running kind of all of the nefarious things that are happening in the region. And so the whole idea of them to get out of one of their opening combat encounters was to try to convince the bugbears and goblins that the half drow was an emissary of the black spider, which they succeeded in doing. And so that ended up creating this whole thing where they had this dungeon that was their opening dungeon. After they killed a few of the goblins and I think one of the bugbears, they had this pocket of then bugbears and goblins that they could use to their advantage because they thought that they were carrying out the will of the black spider. And then the way that developed is they were able to take a bunch of those goblins, and we ran one session where they fought one of the side quests that they were supposed to do as the goblins and a bugbear going out to do the mission for them, which was a blast. And I thought they were going to just get slaughtered by this bunch of orcs, but they rolled really well and defeated them without, I think they lost one goblin out of everything. And it was just so fun to see how that developed from there. And then that character ended up sort of going down a very dark path, as saying they were the emissary of the dark spider because they were sort of finding avenues to power, and ended up getting marked by Lolth, which was setting up this sort of weird situation where they were turning evil, and the rest of the character, because they were getting manipulated by the god of spiders. And basically it was going to be setting up a part where the group was going to end up being split and at odds with each other, basically because of that. And none of that is in the adventure path. Like none of those things were actually in there. And so that's a lot of the fun that I have, is when the group can put their stamp on what's going on in the world. And like with our campaign, like some of that stuff's already starting to happen, and I love that stuff. And I'm excited to sort of see what sort of develops from that as we continue to move forward with that. Now, whether this system, the Dungeon Crawl Classic system, lends itself to that, I guess we'll find as we talk more.
Yeah, we sure will. Before we jump into our main show, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Premier Health. Check out their website at premierhealthmn.com. That's Premier Health, MN as in Minnesota.com. If you enjoy our content, please support the show at patreon.com/OIO. That's patreon.com/OIO. Your support helps pay for all of the media that we consume for the show, as well as the hidden costs of running a podcast. And if you enjoy our personalities, you can follow us all on social. You can email the show at overratedpod@gmail.com. That's overratedpod@gmail.com. Follow Burns at HobbyBoxBurns on X and twitch.tv/HobbyBoxBurns. Follow me at TomSologic.OIO on Instagram and Blue Sky. And follow Casey at
@R_Casey on X, and I don't remember Blue Sky. It's too long, and I don't really go on there much anymore anyway. So X is the best way to find me. Unfortunately, because it's a cesspool of hate.
I mean, it sounds like it fits you and how you feel about this game, but like we can also just drop your home address if that helps, dude. You can also follow the show at facebook.com/outside-is-overrated. That's facebook.com/outside-is-overrated. We're going to start our discussion today with a history lesson. I wasn't entirely honest in the open of the show. Dungeon Crawl Classics is not a new game. What we played is actually the 10th printing of the system, which debuted back in 2012. I've played several different RPG systems since my D&D 3.0 heyday, and I had no idea that this thing existed. I originally pitched this episode as a chance to try the Final Fantasy XIV RPG, but Burns, you had just picked up Dungeon Crawl Classics and encouraged us to try it. Besides hating Casey, like, how did this game end up on your radar?
So I first heard about this game at Adepticon this March, as some of my friends that I went to the convention with had recently played it some, and since they saw that Goodman Games had a booth at Adepticon, they were talking about it a lot, and a lot of the things that they were describing, made it sound like it would be a really interesting game system to try. So it was there that I picked up the 496-page rule book and the chart reference book and a level 0 adventure and some of the funky dice. So I now have a D2 and a D3 and a D5 and a D7. Since we've been playing D&D recently, and I know that John had experience with D&D, I figured this would be a much better system to run kind of on short notice than trying to get Final Fantasy XIV tabletop role playing game to work in Roll20 and everything along those lines. Just because this has a much closer analog to D&D, so it plays into that experience and sort of that general fantasy. Whereas I know Casey has never played Final Fantasy XIV, and John did a little bit. I just didn't know that was going to be as easy of a sort of buy-in to doing that. And so if I was going to be playing a new system, this felt like it would be an easier thing to make work than the FF14 TTRPG. But maybe next year we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're all going to be in Minnesota next year, so like the sky's the limit, right?
Woo!
Let me try to explain what Dungeon Crawl Classics is. In most role-playing games, character creation is about building your hero. You pick a class, you optimize your stats, and you try to keep that character alive for months or even years of adventures. Dungeon Crawl Classics has a different idea. It hands you 4 to 5 random peasants with no skills, peasants not presents, shut up Burns, you get terrible equipment and a high likelihood of death, and then it throws them all into a meat grinder called a funnel.
I need to address one inaccuracy there. You don't have no skills. You have an occupation, which is one of 100 randomly chosen things. And that tells you what weapons you kind of know how to handle. And it also tells you what random item you brought into the dungeon with you. And so, Tom, you had one person that brought, what was it, a deer pelt?
I was just going to bring up, what's her name's deer pelt. Super useful. Like, that was great up against the clay golem. Like, and like, you get your skills when you get your level 1 character. We'll get there, Burns. Like,
Monterey Jack had his hen with, because he was a farmer. And what's more fun than wandering around a dungeon with a random hen? And you were able to use it in one of the puzzles for a little bit too, to try to see what was going on.
I did, yes.
And Casey, you are a notorious min-maxer who hates playing anything you won't dominate. You can correct me if that's hyperbole, but you're a big-time min-maxer. John, you reflected on your own min-max tendencies as we played. So, did our heads explode when we made characters, or what?
I mean, I hated this with a burning fiery passion. Like, I couldn't stand it. Like, and not just because I couldn't min max anything, but like part of why I enjoyed tabletop RPGs is when you create these characters, you're also creating a story that goes along with your characters, and like investing the time in these characters, and like I just like that aspect of it and how you're gonna fit them into what eventually becomes the whole story, right? And like you don't do that at all with these guys. You start with, like you said, 4 or 5 just completely random characters. They all pretty much suck from the beginning unless you do roll well. Like everything is just based on random dice rolls, and it was extremely frustrating for me to say the
Well,
least.
I was put off by the system. I was trying to come in with an open mind and like no prejudice because like I've played a lot of games where you create a character and you roll into the dungeon and you start building from there. This was something different, and that's a credit. Like it was a different experience. Um, I knew that the characters were going to die. I just didn't know like really how to apply them. It's like, do I try to save all my guys? Do I try to like pick somebody that's the sacrificial lamb? Like, how do I balance losing my guys versus Casey and John losing theirs? And like, it was hard to like figure out that balance of like, kind of when to engage my characters in like an equitable way.
So,
I mean,
oh, go ahead, John.
yeah, I was just gonna say it was kind of refreshing though, right? Like, you know, the way we did it, like, you know, we set up our first character, and like, you know, when Roll20 did a great job. It's kind of like, all right, here you go, push the button, it does everything, and we're gonna pick everything for you. And you could, if you wanted to, say, I want this guy to be chaotic this, or I'm going to pick his alignment and pick his job. You could do that if you want. We just opted to say, randomize it and go, right? Which I thought was kind of fun, and also like harkened me back to like when I was rolling characters back when, you know, I first started playing D&D. You had a little more of an idea of what you were trying to build, right? But when you were rolling stats on characters and you're rolling, you know, your 3d6s, right? You could end up with like, you know, a pretty junky character. I know, like, I mean, how many times have we all re-rolled in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 to get the proper stats to have like your fighter guy you want to play to have 1899 strength, right? Like those things that like you would game a video game to just say, no, you can't game it. These are the rolls you got. This is the character you have. And now let's see how the story unfolds and let you play that character to determine what he's going to be at level 1. So it was like, as soon as I let go of like that min-max idea of like, what are my skills? I don't know what I'm going to do, this and that. And I started to embrace this idea of like, well, no, they're level 0. None of them even know what they're going to do. He's just a farmer. What would a farmer do in this? He would throw his pitchfork, right? What would a court jester do in this, right? He would do this. What would this character, like this elf, do? He would do this, right? And that started to like, you know, frame a story around these characters, which then made it fun to actually like be like, oh, it's just a bunch of bumbling idiots who have never been heroes trying to be heroes, and in a room that's designed to kill them. So it's kind of like throwing these idiots into a fun house. It's kind of fun to try and like figure out how we escape it.
You said that character creation was refreshing in a way, and I would liken it to if you eat ramen every day and you want to freshen up your ramen, you decide to just like make it without water one day and you just like crunch on the dry noodles. That's how Dungeon Crawl Classics was refreshing from a character creation standpoint.
Well, I think the thing is, when you roll your character, you're not creating your character, right? That's the point of this. Creating your character is what's done in the first dungeon. When you're rolling your character, you're just getting a framework for you to then say, all right, I'm going to take these 5 people and then I'm going to start to build out who their actual character is, right? And that then leads into how you play them and what they turn into at level 1. Rolling the dice and getting what's on the sheet is just what like kind of sets you up to make the decisions that make your character in the funnel of doom.
I agree with that to an extent. as a level 0, you're so sucky that you and you're forced to melee, right? You're just meleeing everything. And it's all still based on roll 20s and some other things that we'll get into. But like when you hit that level 1, which we're jumping ahead of ourselves, and you get into the actual character creation, like I was again pigeonholed by my dice rolls from the beginning. Like, so I get stuck with a mage because my intelligence happened to be high. Like, sure, I could have like created them as a warrior, but I only had 6 strength, right? Like I wanted a warrior, but like, nope, I can't have that. I'm stuck as a mage. And then not only do I get stuck as a mage, but then I'm stuck again. Like you can't do anything with that character like as a mage because your spells then again are based on dice rolls, which again we're getting ahead of ourselves. But like at level 0, like with a farmer, I get what you're saying. And I actually did. There were times like I'm not gonna like say that I didn't enjoy play through. I did enjoy like going through the dungeon and like trying to hack and slash our way through and just bumble around and try to figure stuff out. Like that part was fun. But the character creation and the story and like that for me was just I don't know. I did not enjoy that part of it.
So, excuse me, I wanted to just chop us right there. Let Burns rebut to the our thoughts on character creation, and then we'll talk about our experience in that level 0 dungeon.
Yeah, so from my experience with playing in games and running games, I feel like most of the time, I would say like a vast majority of the time coming in, everybody knows this is the class I want to be. And this is the subclass that I'm going to spec into, right? Aside from that, I feel like a good 75% of the time, nobody has any idea what their background is anyway. Um, and like when we started our campaign, that was most of what our session 0 or 0.5, as I want to call it, was like trying to iron out what that background was. Um, and so and I think there's value in trying to figure out how these people sort of meet together. And I think now that I've DM'd longer, I can do a better job of like facilitating that setup. Um, the way I liken this, and I feel like this game maybe fits a little bit more into being more like one shot friendly than anything, is that it just takes off a lot of that character creation lift. Building a character in D&D, even with even like 5th edition or 5.5e, still takes a lot of time to figure it out. And especially for somebody that hasn't played the system, there are a lot of decision points that you have to go through to figure out how to put everything together. And so I feel like a lot of focus goes into putting those decisions together, that people actually don't think about. This is actually who this character is. They think about the stats, or the character class, and have maybe a rough idea that they're going to be, they're a paladin for their god, but they have like a mean streak or something like that. Like they maybe have that little bit of what they want to do with their character, but that's probably it. And so I feel like the thing about Dungeon Crawl Classics, especially for people that either aren't experienced with role playing or aren't like super role play heavy players, so that's something that doesn't come like natural to them. I feel like this gets rid of that awkwardness when you're starting out, and it's just like, no, you're just a villager. This dungeon opened up. It does that once every 1,000 years in this town. You're kind of sick of being a farmer, so you're just going to run into the dungeon and say, well, what the hey? I'm going to try to make it as an adventurer. Hopefully I make my way out. I didn't hear that 1,000 years ago everybody got slaughtered and nobody came out. I don't know that part of the lore. I just know that this happens every now and again. And I feel like that happens. I feel like that helps with just sort of jumping into the game. And kind of like John said, I think a lot more of what the experience is supposed to be is then building the story sort of organically through the adventure that you're having, as opposed to coming in with a fully fleshed out idea of who your character is, and hopefully it meshes with the idea that everybody else came up with. Because I've also had that happen before, where you have all these ideas that people have that are playing in the party, and it's like, oh, well, it really doesn't make sense that these two people would probably be hanging out together. We'll see how that goes. And sometimes that can make for really interesting situations. Sometimes it can lead to the party breaking down at times and just getting slogged down into these two characters just can't agree on anything. And so I feel like the system does help with some of that, with just sort of getting into it, chucking dice, and seeing what happens. And I feel like also that it's one of those things where when you're going through the level zero funnel adventure, it can inform that decision then when you get to level 1 and choose your class. So did you have somebody that had limited strength that somehow like slew a few monsters? You can use that to flavor the choices you make in your character creation, with what the class is. And his strength is an 8, but he's still going to be a warrior, and we're just going to see what happens. I feel like leaning into it that way is a little bit more of what like the what the designers intended with the system.
Which is a totally fine way to look at things, unless you're somebody like me who loves to min-max things, and then the thought of having a warrior with 8 strength is just like would make your head explode.
So we're doing a good job of parsing out who this game is for and who it is for not. It is not for min-maxers and people who rely on early preparation. Like, if you can't roll with the chaos as it happens, like, this is not going to be a game for you. But there are people who believe that the dice don't lie, and like Do Hell comes to mind, and like Pat's brother Chuck would be another one. It's like, you roll the dice, you see what happens. So like, we're gonna have very divided thoughts on this game overall, but I can definitely see why some people really gel with Dungeon Crawl Classics. So John, Casey, and I all came in blind. We rolled 5 random characters apiece. We chose alignments without knowing how that will impact our future lives, and then we just run into the dungeon. We encountered puzzles, traps, and monsters to fight. Was the experience like... what was that experience like, jumping into a dungeon with level 0 characters and no knowledge of how the game works?
I'll be the negative Nancy again here, but like, so I think the main issue for me in this part, in like the early stages, and you kind of hinted on it early, Tom, are when you first start, each of us had 5 characters each, or is it 4 characters each? 4, right?
We have 5 each.
5 each, so 15 characters that you're trying to control and figure out stuff to do, right? And you're trying to figure out this puzzle collectively in the beginning. And like you said, Tom, when you have 6 people in a party, that gets to be a lot, right? So we have 15 people, and it's like, oh, okay, Robbie Gorgonzola is going to do this. And then my characters had cheese names, FYI. So Maggie Mozzarella is going to do this, and blah, 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 blah. Well, as we all go through each one of our 5 players, that's a long time for one person to be sitting there. And I just got so like, I'm like, oh my God. And then we couldn't figure out like the first little puzzle. And it, like, spoiler alert for anybody who wants to play this, but it ends up being just like, you kind of just have to wait it out, right? And like, and like the whole thing, I'm like, it was so frustrating for me by the time we got through all that, like sitting and waiting and like, okay, I want to try this. Okay, let's see if we can get this part to let's jam this under the door. Well, it's like, you and John are going back and forth. In the meantime, I'm just sitting there on the couch, like 15 minutes goes by before I'm able to like use any of my characters because you guys are going through, all right, I got all my 10. Now it's your turn to see what you can do with yours. And it was like, oh my God, this is just a slog.
And that was the opening door of the dungeon. Like, Casey, I don't fault you for saying that this game could be very frustrating. The first 3 rooms were pretty frustrating. And spoiler alert for anyone playing this opening adventure, Burns, do you remember what it's called off the top of your head?
The Palace of the Stars or something like that. It's the one that's in the rule book.
Sure, the Palace of the Stars. So it's a beginning level adventure. So if you listen to this, decide you want to play, sorry that I'm going to spoil these first 3 rooms for you. But the very first thing you encounter is a timed door. You have to wait 2 hours in game time before the door opens. Like, if you force that door open, boom, trap goes off, someone's going to die. And like, that's it's kind of it's not a very user-friendly puzzle to start the adventure with. And then you walk into the next room and these statues just throw spears at you. And like the first people in are just going to get skewered. So it's like, oh, all right, well, that pares it down from 15 down to some. And then the next room, you walk into a room with a flame statue. And like, as we were playing this, it seemed very challenging because like you're trying to get out of this room and the statue turns and like roasts people with fire. And it's like, all right, there's got to be a solution for this, right? And like we looked at everything, we touched everything, we tried to do everything. And like, it felt like when we were playing it, there was no solution to the puzzle. And then eventually, after we got like through the dungeon the first time, Burns shared the PDF of the rule book, and I read through the rule book, and I'm like, oh, there is no solution to the puzzle. 5 people are supposed to die in that room, and it's like, man, why'd you have us make 15 characters if like 9 of them are supposed to die in the first like 2 steps? Like, just have us make 10 characters then. And like, I thought this would be a point for us to like open our discussion on like the frustrations of the level 0 dungeon.
I second everything you guys are saying, right? The multiple characters, like 15 characters on a board, slows things down, becomes a slog. That was probably the biggest hurdle, right? And like, I have to give props to Joy. You did a good job of like trying to steer us towards just sit down and wait. Because you were like, okay, you wait another 10 minutes and the lights have moved a little more, guys. But when you have 3 people, 2 of which are min-maxers, right? All 3 of us are gamers and problem solvers, and we're in a room. There's got to be a solution, right? There's got to be a solution to the stupid escape room, and sitting and waiting is not the solution because I want to move forward. And like that was like really frustrating, and I think it's supposed to be because you're supposed to have someone die, right? Every room is supposed to have someone die, and that just didn't click until like we got to that 3rd room with the fire statue. And like I had a guy that just like, well, I'm gonna go look at the statue in the hand, and like my guy just got melted. So it's like, but like those first 2 rooms, not memorable, annoying. That 3rd room though is when I feel like it picked up because like you actually had movement and things happening, and we had some really funny stories and some really interesting things. And that's where I actually saw like, oh, okay, I'm going to take my 5 characters and do something unique with them, right? So I'm gonna have 2 guys come in and like split, and one go one way and one go the other to try and confuse this statue because they're all my characters. I'm going to play them as one. And that's when I thought it started to become a little bit more fun and started to move things along a little quicker.
Yeah, and I followed one of you guys who made it out of the room. We go down, we open another room, we open the door, and there's a giant demon snake monster that's like 4 times the size of a man. And it's like, nope, just close the door and walk out because like we didn't have any weapons. Like we weren't prepared to fight a big thing. And it's like, well, I guess we'll probably all just die in that room. So let's explore the rest of the dungeon first. To summarize our thoughts, there were a lot of frustrations in the early part of the game for us as we were figuring out like the mechanics. And so Burns, now I'll give you a chance to kind of rebut that.
Yeah, so I apologize on the no weapons part. That was a mistake where So the one thing about the book, it is 496 pages, and it could do a better job of fully explaining aspects of character creation in one spot instead of having it have certain bits in different parts. And so I definitely missed, because when you get your occupation, you also get a training in a certain weapon type as your character, which can differ then from whatever you get as a class. So it could technically give you a training in a weapon type that you maybe wouldn't have when you actually choose your class.
So like my farmer would have walked in with a pitchfork and I would have had at least something to poke, because like we were rolling D4s to punch things, and that was a little less than satisfying.
Yes, because you were also supposed to come in with that weapon. So you would have came in with a pitchfork, which would have worked as a spear, basically. Which that would have helped. Though I don't know, there were some aspects of it that I thought was interesting, because part of that kind of made it seem where it's like, oh, okay, well, you go into that first room and the spears get thrown at you, and which you said somebody's supposed to die in each room. Nobody died in that first room because I rolled terribly to try to hit you all, and the one guy that I did hit, I rolled terribly on the damage roll, and so nobody actually died in that first room. You guys got 4 spears, so that was a win. Now the next room, the fire. I think what I could have done better is I could have tried to level set that there's a lot that you're going to have some puzzles early on to sort of help you kind of get into the mode of what to expect a little bit. I did try to level set the fact that, well, you starting off each with 5 characters for a reason, because the point is that those people are supposed to die as you move forward. And you're supposed to sort of pare it down to like, each of you having 2 characters moving forward. So I tried to level set that, but I think there's a few other things that I would have had a better handle on to hopefully make things go a little bit smoother if we started this again.
And Burns, I don't begrudge you as the DM. And like,
Mhm.
you had to know all the rules, and like, none of us literally read a page of the rule book before we jumped in.
Yeah.
So like, I don't begrudge any of that. The thing that specifically upset me early in this game was that fire statue room, because we saw all the stuff, we tried to touch all the stuff, we tried a bunch of different stuff, and it felt like there was no solution to the puzzle. And it turns out I was right. There was no solution to that puzzle. Some people gonna die, and like, it's just super frustrating that there wasn't a way that we could have thought our way out of it. It's like we should have just like all just rolled d20s for all of our characters and been like, all right, lowest 5 numbers all get toasted.
Well, you could have pulled the doors off the hinges and used them as shields. That's one thing that the book specifically said that you could do, and that would give you a little bit more defense against the fire instead of like instant death, basically. And if you didn't like roll a dodge well enough.
I mean, it is kind of a bummer that room 1 and room 3 are timed, right? Like that's the true solution to both of those is like in room 1, you just sit and wait, right? Don't do anything. If you try, because I think in that one, if you do lift the door, you get hurt, right?
Yep.
It's something if you actually do bust the door down, right? So like, and then you get to room 3 and like, I don't know if they're trying to teach you like, oh, maybe you should wait. I think it's just like, no, this room's just going to kill you. And like, I thought like we did a great job of that room. We're like, all right, send the chicken in, see what the chicken's going to do. Right. And it's following the chicken around. Then we're like splitting the party and going into each individual room. Right. And it just turns out, no, you just got to like, let it shoot 5 times and it's done.
And I think like the solution comes down to semantics. I think reading that scenario, like it's supposed to shoot flame for 5 continuous turns, whereas Burns, you broke up those 5 turns over 5 different like logical things that it would aim at. I think the way I interpreted the rules is like it's supposed to shoot for 5 consecutive turns. So maybe we could have roasted one character and everyone else hides until the fire runs out. But like we didn't know it had a finite supply.
No, I mean, I did it by turns because I was having you move all your people and then it would fire. Because it would fire once every turn, or it would fire if somebody tried to exit the room. Those were like the 2 criteria. And so one character tried to open one of the doors and leave, and then the gout of flame came at them. But then I think another character tried to go out the other door, and the fire shot at them, but it didn't hit them because they got out the door. Because only 4 people died instead of 1 with each shot, basically. So
4 people and no chickens.
No chickens. Yeah. Cheddar made it all the way through the dungeon.
I do think though, like when we talk about fun, like once we got past that 3rd room, and I think once we all kind of accepted our fate that like, all right, we might end up I might die, whatever. We get into the next couple of rooms. We did just kind of like have a little bit more of like grip it and rip it. Let's just go. We're running past big monsters to get like to where the secret doors are and where this stuff is. And we're just moving forward. And once we started that ball rolling, and then we realized, oh, we do have to just kind of fight some of these things and like hope the dice go in our favor. And if they don't, they don't. I felt, again, it was just like, oh, okay, this is how we're supposed to play this. I'm not supposed to play this with this idea of like, okay, it's not precision D&D combat, right? Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes D&D, especially as it's moved throughout its life cycle, has moved from a game like this, right, where it's the story and like the dice are telling the story, to more of a min-max precision, right? I am now setting myself up with my character to do the cool moves that I want to do to kill the bad guys. And this game is not like that. All this game is if I'm going to attack, roll a die and you just punch the thing, right? Or you stab it. Like there's no fancy, death strikes from above or quick actions or any of this stuff. So it really did kind of shift when we started just to do that and go with it. And we ended up killing lots of stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult things one of the difficult things with this is that this is a game from earlier times of D&D, a time where people didn't play as much with individual miniatures for every character on a map, and especially with Roll20, trying to have a bunch of different tokens for all the different characters was a little bit difficult. Whereas I feel like the system, and I think there's a little bit early on in the rule book where it talks about that you can easily play it with maps and things like that. But I think the initial intent of the game system in general is to harken back to those original times. So a lot more of the theater of the mind, trying to explain what they're seeing, not necessarily having to have a perfect visual representation of every single room or every single thing that's happening, but trying to describe what they can see and what they can do to kind of go about through there, and maybe using a map to represent things when it's important. And so, but ever since 4th edition D&D, Dungeons and Dragons has been a lot more focused on, I mean, because 4th edition specifically was like, you have a miniature on a map and it's moving and doing all these different things. And I feel like that's what led to a lot of the virtual tabletops becoming popular, because of that. And now it's just like so many people use those to play, which is a good thing, but it also lends itself to certain experiences a lot better than others. And like you guys are saying, having 5 different, sort of tokens to move around on a map, especially when none of them have pictures or any sort of identity that's different from each other. I can understand how that also made things a bit more difficult early on.
And what if all 5 of your characters have really stupid names? Like, gosh, what can I actually say on the air?
Turd Surfer was one of them. You can say that.
There you go.
Oh, Turd Surfer, it's a funny name. He was the star of the show for me. I started in a place similar to Casey. Initially, I truly hated this experience, especially that stupid fire statue. And then towards the end, I was just kind of like, F it, and I started running ahead. Then things got interesting. Then 2 of my characters died, and I went on full tilt. But then they were undeaded, and I said, D&D can eat a big old turd sandwich, man. So, like, this game was a roller coaster of emotions for me. Like, I think I was on a similar trajectory to John.
Well, that's funny. So, like, the characters are knocked down and they're considered dead. And then the whole idea is if within, I think it's within a minute, if one of the other characters comes up and rolls the body over, there's basically a 50-50 chance that they, breathe again and they're still alive.
And I was definitely doing it to check on my characters to see if they could potentially be alive. I wasn't doing it just to like grab the deer pelt and whatever other stupid starting item my 1 hit point idiot had. So like, it was totally a place of kindness and benevolence for me that led to a positive result.
I will say that's one of the things that I kind of enjoyed about this experience is that it gave you it created benefits for being greedy and for being murder hobos. Because from my perspective, it was really interesting to see how everybody engaged and approach different aspects of the dungeon. And one of the things I really liked about how the level 0 adventure was set up was how it would give you distinct benefits for doing certain things. Some of which you guys were able to recognize and realize, and some of which, you maybe would have realized if you were actually even more greedy than you were. But I really liked that aspect of, especially the later parts of the dungeon. Those early parts are literally just trying to sort of point out the fact, yeah, people are going to die. They're supposed to die. This is a cruddy dungeon. If normal people went into a dungeon with no training, they would get killed. To me, that reminds me a lot of Dungeon Crawler Carl. In that it's you just got all these people, and whoever went through the door, they survive, but they were probably the unlucky ones, because now they're going to go through this dungeon and get slaughtered unless they're lucky enough to fumble their way through and become level 1 after that. And so that was one of the other things, because I picked this up basically as we were reading, or right after we finished. Can't remember the timeline, but it was as we were reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, or just finished it. So that was one thing that like created like a definite mirror in my mind. It's one of those things where I think it gave you guys it definitely rewarded
aneurysm, the word you're looking for, Vince?
No, but it definitely rewarded you for engaging more aspects of the dungeon. Clearing out one set of enemies made the final fight easier, like significantly easier. Like if you guys had not cleared out the pile of bones in that room, I'm pretty sure it would have been a TPK. Or you guys would have been running upstairs and trying to figure out what to do because instead of waiting 7 rounds before the clay soldiers start attacking, they would have been up on you and moving on you like instantly if the generals were still there. And so that's some of the things that I think are interesting, even if it's not something that's apparent to the players. As the DM, it was something that I could understand. And then it's like, and we're going full spoilers, so sorry, you're probably never going to play this if you're listening to this, or hopefully you forget about it if somebody plays it with you in a couple years. If you guys pluck out a bunch more of the gems out of the pool, it creates that water to come out, and it just completely melts the clay golems, and then you're just like, oh, okay. You got to wade through the water probably at that point, but you're in a much better situation.
So those are perfectly viable solutions. What we did is I sprinted to the end. I got to the end of the dungeon. We got all the treasure, which was weapons, and it's like, oh, well, now we're equipped to deal with some things. Let's go fight some monsters. So, interesting that there were multiple paths there. That was a cool connection between those wonky bones that we fought early on and the generals down beneath.
And I also like that one of Casey's characters was the one that was like, oh, look at all this crap. Well, I'm going to go tell everybody upstairs what's going on there. Hopefully these guys will die, and then I'll look smart. Runs up, tells everybody upstairs, hey, there's a bunch of bad things down here. You guys should come down. And then come downstairs. And meanwhile, yeah, everybody was like, we tried to attack this thing. It didn't go well. So we're just going to run into this room. And oh, yeah, here's all the treasure.
Yeah, it's like a new strategy I'll use in like every role-playing game from now on. Like I will beeline for the end of the dungeon,
Run to the end,
run past all the monsters, just like find that loot, find that glowing orb. Like if the dude says, "Are you not intimidated?" I'll say, "No," and I'll just scoop up the loot.
I think the other favorite part of that was, thanks to Roll20, the door to the final room, which was supposed to be secret, wasn't hidden. And I realized that even though I clicked hide the session before, somehow it didn't hide it, or it got unhid at some point. And then I realized it before we played the next session, so I hit it when you guys were down in that room. And then, but like a couple of you said, I thought there was a door back here. It's like, no, it must have just been a weird glitch of Roll20. And then somebody got close enough. It's like, do an intelligence check. And you passed it, and it's just like, oh, there's a door here.
Fancy that. Thank goodness I was running directly at this section of wall. Good times. We've got plenty more monsters to slay in our discussion of Dungeon Crawl Classics, but first, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Premier Health.
This episode is brought to you by Premier Health, home to Dr. Brian Camille and Dr. Kelsey Camille, 2 chiropractors who know a thing or two about keeping your body aligned, whether you're role-playing a deep narrative experience or just rolling dice with some random noobs you have no affinity for.
Unlike Dungeon Crawl Classics and other tabletop role-playing games, your health is no game. At Premier Health, they specialize in everything from killer statues to evil demon snakes, helping you feel better one adjustment at a time.
So if your back feels like you overextended yourself like a peasant landing a crit on a clay golem, or if you're ready to upgrade your health, visit premierhealthminnesota.com and schedule your next move. That's premierhealthmn.com.
Premier Health.
Premier Health, because the best defense is feeling your best.
Check out their website at premierhealthmn.com. That's premierhealthmn.com. Eventually, we all made it through the dungeon with 3 characters surviving apiece. For level 0 characters who survive, you become level 1 characters and you pick a class. You can gear up with loot you grab from the dungeon, and this is essentially character creation, except you already have a rapport with your characters. So did the creation funnel make you feel more attached to your characters because they had to survive first?
For me, it did. It was surprising that the characters that lived, or I thought the ones who died, right? I didn't think the ones who lived were going to live. I thought they were going to be the ones that would die, and then actually the one I thought was going to be gone early on became like my powerhouse in combat, right? So like I had a dwarf who like had a low strength, right? Had like a luck of 4. Like his luck was like abysmal. So like he just became the like this fun like idea of this character, like, and like dwarves get to pick like when I went through the character creation, like dwarves get to pick like their lucky weapon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is his like favorite weapon, and it's gonna be his battle axe that he had in the last weapon. Like, because you get like your luck determines the bonuses you get on your favorite weapon. So it's just like, yeah, he's always had like his lucky axe that like he's now gonna carry with him, but it like always fails, right? And like just the things like I was creating around him just made it super fun. And like I lucked out with the character creation process. Even like my mage, like all the spells I collected for my elf, like tied together in a really cool way with like this, with like the magic system's really neat to where like you roll, and if you fail and you critical fail, you can get like a corruption, right? And like that like gives you all these negative things, but also like just casting your spell, you might have something negative happen. And I had like a spell where I had magic missile, and we were all like, sweet, I was the first person to get a spell that like actually did some damage. We're like, magic missile. And then, oh yeah, by the way, every time you cast it, you have a ever increasing chance to basically rip open a dimensional rift and summon this demon that could possibly kill everyone. And like if you fail, he might like turn and like kill all your teammates and do all these crazy things. So like it was just like all my spells and the little bonuses and negatives aligned in a really cool way.
So one of the things that I appreciated about playing this game with you, John, and you too, Casey, like you guys both put thought into your characters, and like you were building something from the beginning. Like Scory had his own thing, and like y'all had a thoughtful like art for your character. I came in with stupid names for my characters. Honest to God, Turd Surfer was my most serious name. The other 4 were all like phrases that I eventually condensed down to something that sounded kind of like names. So I shattered my own immersion from the start. And like that's the problem with completely random. It's like I didn't think about a character, and it's like, oh well, here's a series of words that work together. Like one of my characters was named Chuck Loves the Cool D, and like it just. I didn't start from a place of immersion, and then like getting through the dungeon, I hated my characters, man. Like I had the 2 that died against the clay golem. I'm like, you guys suck. Like you're worth. I don't even want you to live. Like, oh, I'm glad I rolled you over and you're still alive, but like you were the 2 that survived. Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for bringing your hit point back to the table. That's really helpful. So like the funnel didn't make me more attached to my characters. If anything, it made me hate them more. Before we talk about choosing characters, Casey, like, did you have a thought about, like, did you build any rapport with your characters through that first dungeon?
I mean, kind of funny. Like when I had the characters and was making the names, I had Billy Barada and Maggie Mozzarella, and I thought it would be kind of fun to like role play them as a couple, and just because they were, it's the Italian cheese couple, trying to make it through, and ironically they were both of the characters that died, so that didn't that didn't really come to fruition at all.
Billy Barada got melted.
Yeah, Barada did. He got melted, yes.
And Maggie Mozzarella she got bit. She didn't get eaten.
Yeah, she got smoked by the snake. But and then afterwards, I don't know, like as we were going through, I didn't really feel like I had any sort of plan beyond that for any of the characters. So once we made it through into level 1, it's like I wanted a warrior, but I didn't have any characters that had the ability to do that. So like I was actually really looking forward to my halfling, and seeing how that progresses. Like that kit was actually pretty cool. Some of the things that they were able to do, and like my stats aligned pretty well with that as from a min-maxing standpoint. But and I actually like I don't usually go for a wizard, but just like I had like 14 or 15 intelligence with one of my characters, so I'm like, oh, this will be a great wizard. And then like most of my spells that I ended up rolling were just like, oh my god, this is going to be a nightmare to try to figure out how I'm going to be effective at all in any sort of a battle moving forward with this character. The wizard, the elf had some kind of cool stuff, but I like my wizard was just going to be, I don't know, an agent of chaos, like like John said. Like every single time you roll, like I could summon rats. You know, if I casted a spell of a magic shield, and those rats would attack everybody, and well, I was protected, but then I couldn't do. I don't know. It was just this game is it's chaos. It's like they I got the feeling like especially after making it through level 0 and then character creation, it's like in the end, I don't think they want you to succeed. They just want it to be a fun, chaotic gameplay experience, and that is really what it is.
The word they use in their marketing copy is flavorful. It is a flavorful experience. Let's talk about that character creation a bit more. This is not the roll everything randomly at the start of the game. We all survived that first dungeon. We got to make level 1 characters, and you get 7 classes to choose from total. They're warrior, thief, wizard, cleric, elf, dwarf, and halfling. And so, like, your warrior fights things. Your dwarf is kind of a modified warrior. Your halfling is kind of modified thief. Your elf is kind of a modified wizard, and the cleric is the healer. So, like, you know, we're good, right? How was this initial leveling experience? Casey, tell us, like, how did it work with the wizards? Like, how did you start with 4 spells. How do you generate those?
It's just dice rolls. That's all it is. So you roll. So I'm trying to think of the order, right? It was a D6 first, right?
So yeah,
D20?
Basically you have 26 possible options that you could roll for spells. And so since we didn't have like a D26 at all, basically I had you roll high or low, and then it was either from the first 20 spells or the last 20 spells as what you're rolling then on a D20 to determine what your spells are.
Yep. And then after you rolled that, so high, low, and then you roll the D20, and the D20 tells you what your spell is. And then after that, you roll a D100, and the D100 basically tells you what your chaos is, right? So it could be neutral, like you could roll, and it could be nothing. So you just cast a spell. But and I don't know, like Joey probably knows this, but like I don't know if it was a 50-50 chance or how it worked. But like on my spells, 2 of them were neutral, 2 of them ended up like being something like, oh man, that basically makes the spell almost worthless every time I cast it. Or if not worthless, it's going to be like we're going to have to deal with the bad that comes with what should be good.
You want to talk about worthless, man? I got summon familiar, summon animal, and create food for 3 of my 4 spells. So like, I don't want to hear it, dude. I don't care what your negatives are. Like, unless like my spells also like get cast by Gal Gadot, like there's no value there.
So just so we can like level set, and then there's my elf who got ill touch, right? Which the only negative about it was I had to like do spell burn to use it. So it's like, but like when I did it, basically I phased out and went intangible, invisible for 6 rounds, right? So awesome. Get out, like my last ditch, something's closing in, I can touch it, do damage, and disappear and can't be hit, right? I had
Wait, before we move on, what is spell burn?
Oh, spell burn, basically you just have to like, you can burn, you could basically say, I'm gonna like, oh, if I'm about to die, I could say, take 8 of my strength points and add them to this roll, right? But some spells say, in order for you to cast this, you just have to do 1 spell burn. So I would have had to say, hey, drop my strength by 1 temporarily, right? You can regain it back in order to cast that spell, right? So then my other spell was Flame Touch, which I had no negatives for. I could just do it with no negatives. Hooray. And I got like a plus, so it was +2 because it was my favorited spell. And then I had Magic Missile, which again caused the Chaotic Rift to like go up by 1%. So like the whole goal was like, how high can we get this? Because we wanted to see like, cast it once, it's at 1, twice it's at 2. So like, if I cast it 50 times, I'm going to have a 50% chance of summoning this demon that might destroy us all, right? And then my last spell was like some cool like spell where like I could like put a mask on my face that would like scare people or do different things, right? So my guy was like awesome. It was totally rad.
Yeah, I think one of the system is, it's like mercurial magic is basically the D100. And the idea is that casting magic is a chaotic thing, and nobody would have a complete control over the spells that they're tapping into. And the other idea of the system, of the magic system, is much more kind of like D&D Warlocks, in that you have this power to cast these spells because you have some sort of otherworldly patron that you're tapping into to be able to cast these spells. And if you do bad enough, you have the ability to pull on corruption, which will then, start to sort of give you either temporarily or longer lasting negatives that will kind of continue to pile onto each other. And the book has an illustration and an explanation about it, where it's like, first level magic users are powerful, and then high level magic users are scared of casting magic because of, is that going to be the final one that fully corrupts them and turns them into this weird puddle of ooze or whatever. And so I really think that that's interesting. And so yeah, you roll the D100. It seemed like the more on the extremes of the roll you got, the worse that they were. But there was also some randomness in between. If you rolled in the middle of the chart, it was no effect, which is probably what people would want. So you kind of wanted to be in the 43 to like 65 range or something like that, to have a chance of not having negatives for your spells. Otherwise you're getting these random things, and there's so many of them in there that and that's one of the, I think that felt like one of the more interesting aspects of the system, just because, sure, you have this great power, there's also these negatives that can be attached to it. And that's, I think, a lot of what the system was. And the Spellburn kind of floats in that, too, where, sure, you can temporarily lower your strength. It's going to take you time to heal that back. You can temporarily lower these stats to make yourself a more powerful wizard, and the more you succeed your cast by, the more your spell does. So for John, for instance, when he cast his magic missile, if he just barely succeeded, it would hit and do 1 damage. The higher successes he got, it would hit multiple times and deal more damage than just 1. And so it's like kind of this trying to push it. How much do you want to push it to get the higher reward out of the spell that you're trying to cast? And how important is it to try to get that to cast, to get that to be as powerful as it can be in that moment? And so those are aspects that I think are really interesting about the system.
I wish that if there's one thing I would change, I wish that there was a way to just make sure that you at least have 1 offensive spell, right? So like, this game loves tables and like rolling. Yeah. So like if your first 3 rolls or whatever are all defensive or summoning animals or whatever, what have you. Like I wish there was just one way. I was like, okay, you didn't get this on your first one. Your 4th spell is going to be, you could randomize it again, just throw it into one of your tables somehow and just make sure that you have some sort of way to defend yourself other than the weapon that you're not going to be very good at using, because as a wizard your strength is super low, right? So your odds of hitting are not going to be all that great.
Well, one way the game counters that, wizards are a lot better with general combat than in other similar games. Like a D&D wizard is going to suck at fighting. In this game, like a wizard can use a longbow, so like you can keep your distance if you have a higher dex than your strength. Like it gives you a way to still contribute to the party, and then hopefully, I didn't look at what future level ups meant for spells or like how you learn spells, but hopefully you'd learn more spells as you level up and become useful as a caster.
Yeah, you do.
But you had to spend all the time in the pool to get all those gems so you could actually afford a longbow. Unless you, because we found one, but they're 50 gold. And 50 gold is a lot, because I thought, I thought that too. I'm like, I didn't roll any offensive spells. And we're like, okay, I'll get a longbow, and then I could at least attack from distance. And I'm like, 50 gold for a longbow? I didn't have close to that much. So I couldn't afford that.
So it was very rewarding for me to sprint all the way to the end of the dungeon, get to the treasure room, and like have my pick of the loot. So like, that's why I had the longbow, because I was the first one in the treasure room. So good times.
Harry Beanbag was lucky.
Oh yeah, that was another one of my characters. Another very serious name. Um,
I mean,
um,
the overall process, some people hated it. Tom thinks it's streamlined, right? Some people
I
might
didn't
love
actually
this.
say that. I actually just wrote it down in the notes. I forgot to say it when I
Oh.
said my piece. But yeah, it was a really streamlined experience. Only 7 jobs to choose from and like rolling for your spells. So like, it just goes really quickly. Sorry, go ahead, John.
And I was gonna say it actually to me felt odd and cumbersome, right? And I think though that's kind of by design, but maybe that also is because I didn't have a player's guide to read through 100 times. And I really do think that like in order to like whenever you do any TTRPG, you gotta have that player's guide because say I'm gonna sit down and I am going to I'm gonna read the entire description and just really get in and understand what this character does, all the bells, all the whistles, right? The min-maxer in me does want to like do that and say, no, that's gonna be I'm gonna die too much with that, right? Or this or that. But PDFs they're just not the same. But I don't think it was worse than like early D&D, right? It did remind me of like second edition D&D. Everything about this kind of brought me back to THAC0 and like weird, goofy, like, basement nerd D&D stuff. Right? Yeah, it was a good experience, but definitely would be like buy a player's handbook would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, how would you up that patronage by like $2 or $5, and we'll get books for everyone next time. It'll be a good time. One other note on character creation, in all seriousness, like one of the things that I think this game is a gem for, no 2 magic users will ever be exactly the same. And so like, for those of us who have played a lot in D&D, it's like, the min-max spells and like, what spells people tend to choose at each level because they have the most utility, and like you do that because they're useful. In this game, like, my wizard was different from Casey's wizard, although we both sucked. It was different from John's wizard, who actually had utility, would be different from any other wizard that we ever play. And I think that's a really unique feature of Dungeon Crawl Classics.
It's interesting you bring that up, right? Considering when the game was made, right? If you like, we've reached a point now with the internet and like there's metagaming, right? So like that is like people now it's like, all right, I'm gonna, I want to make the most strongest character ever. And it's not about necessarily character creation. It's about, I'm going to take 2 levels of fighter, and then I'm going to go ahead and take this feat so that I get the extra attack. And then I'm taking this 3rd level feat, and then I'm going to take 3 levels of thief. And they have this whole game plan to make the most uber character. And it's kind of fun how this game just destroys that. Right? You can't do that because it doesn't even allow, one, there's no options for it, but even for the characters where you could possibly do that, it says, no, we're going to randomize it enough that like you can't make the uber meta ultimate build.
Yeah, so this game just hates you, Casey, with a burning fiery passion.
Yeah. I think some of the other things with character creation, I think one of the things I really like about it is that in this system, your alignment definitely matters. And I feel like that's something I would have tried to set up a little bit more ahead of time if I would have realized in a little bit more detail when we started exactly how much that affects things. So, for instance, one of the big things is the cleric. The cleric heals much more effectively people of their same alignment. And then if anybody happens to be of an opposed alignment, they actually heal those people less. So, for instance, if your cleric is neutral, you're only 1 step away from both levels. So it's pretty easy for you to be able to heal both people that are chaotic and lawful. If you're a chaotic healer, you're going to be really good at healing chaotic people, a little worse at healing neutral people. And then if you have to heal lawful people, you're not going to heal them anywhere near as good. Plus, you're also going to gain corruption because your god doesn't like you healing people that are of an opposing alignment. And so I really enjoy that has a little bit more to that. Thief is the same way, where if you are a lawful thief, you're better at certain skills than other things because as a lawful thief, you're not necessarily about sneaking around and stealing stuff as much as you are about just getting around to places. So you're better at climbing and you're better at picking, I can't remember if it's picking locks, but you're better at a lot of other things than if you were a chaotic thief. you're a lot better at more of those like picking locks and some of the more like sort of, I guess, evil seeming abilities. So I really like that aspect of the game, and that adds of a little bit of stuff that you can play around with a little bit more. I think, since it is a choice that you have. Um, I think I would have tried to give people a little bit better understanding of that going in, than I did with you three. But this was one of the more difficult parts of the process for me. Mostly just, well, partially because Roll20 went down for an hour while we were in the middle of trying to level up to level 1. So we had to go analog to try to take care of a lot of that. And then once we finally got back up and running, it was actually a lot smoother to try to, because it'll automatically roll a lot of the things for you, when you add spells and so on. But also there was just, each class has so many rules that are unique to them. Trying to keep all that straight was really difficult from my perspective. And so trying to make that as streamlined a process as possible was pretty difficult. Because just like with any rule book, you can read through stuff a few times, but there's still stuff that you got to try to look it up. And so I felt like I was constantly paging back and forth through the rule book to try to look at different aspects of things to make sure that we were on, the right path for different things. So that was probably one of the more difficult parts of all of the stuff that we played.
I'm like, this was an unreasonable ask of you, Birds. Like, as a DM, for like you to help us with each one of our 3 characters making that jump to level 1, like, this is a case where we need more rule books. So that's something that I should have thought through more in advance. But like, came in blind, didn't really know what the evolution was going to be like.
So part of that's on me though, because I definitely told you all to come in blind to it and that we would be fine. So, because I kind of was interested to see how that would affect the process. I think if I could have been a little bit more, so like if I could have been more prescriptive when we ended the session after you finished that, going into the next one of saying, okay, for this character, look at these 2 or 3 classes. For this character, look at these 2 or 3 classes. For all of you that are either elves, dwarves, or halflings, look and see if you want to be that or if you want to be one of the other 4 classes. I would have been a little bit more prescriptive with that to give you guys the opportunity to try to focus a little bit more instead of being more open-ended and just saying, oh, we'll figure it out when we get together next time.
I mean, we were all capable of looking at what our highest stat was and building around that. As far as like how this game works, another thing that makes Dungeon Crawl Classics unique is the dice that you use. D&D and other systems use a D20. You want to attack a monster? Roll a 20-sided die. Trying to sneak through the shadows? Roll your D20. In Dungeon Crawl Classics, we did frequently roll D20s, but the game also uses a dice chain. Instead of adding tons of modifiers, the game often changes the size of the die itself. So if you're disadvantaged, maybe you'll roll a D16 instead of a D20. So like your cap for rolling is 16 instead of 20. If you have advantage, maybe you'll roll a D24, which again raises that cap and gives you a better chance of higher success. Everything is done on a table, so rolling higher or lower can have different outcomes, particularly with magic. John, you and I played some random combat encounters with our level 1 characters. How did that compare to the level 0 experience, and was that low-level combat satisfying?
I mean, yes, I think once you hit level 1 and you had a real weapon and you had hit points, so you didn't die with a sneeze, it was a much, much better experience, right? It was way better than level 1. I felt like I had a bit more of an idea who my characters were at that point, what they should be doing, right? We had like some established roles, right? Now, we also had a really, really clear goal, right? Burns just threw some monsters down and said, kill these monsters. So it made it easy for us to kind of like dig in and just play around with them. But yeah, I think it was a much, much better system.
After playing the level 0 dungeon, I was skeptical, and that is putting it kindly. But playing a series of encounters was actually really interesting. The magic system turns out is awesome. I love playing my cleric, and like once I realized like the alignment thing, it's like, all right, well, only Scory is like the same chaotic alignment as me, so Scory's gonna be my buddy. And like from that point on, I was only gonna bless Scory. I thought that like the system with the clerics where you earn the disfavor of your god either by rolling a critical failure or by healing non-aligned characters, like I thought that was a cool system. And like each time you make your gods mad, you add another check to your sheet, and like that raises your chance of an auto fail on spells by 1 point. So like if you get up to 15, like you got to roll at least 16 or higher to have a chance of your spell succeeding. Burns mentioned earlier that like higher success on spells creates wildly different outcomes. So like if I barely hit my bless roll, like I would bless Scory for 1 turn, but like if I rush it on that roll, I could bless it by like a 1d4 for 1d6 rounds. And like I really loved, it turns out I loved how the magic worked for my characters who had spells that were applicable for what we were doing.
And you mentioned Scory, right? Scory became like my favorite character to play.
He became my favorite character too, dude. Like, I don't want to play that on the dwarves. I swear to God, if we ever do the funnel again, if I roll a dwarf, he's just gonna sit at the entryway and say, "Go get him, guys," because like I'm surviving this.
Right. He like dwarves and fighters are these really interesting. They have a couple cool mechanics, and dwarves get one. What's cool about dwarves is they're sword and board, right? Like if you have a shield, you get to do a shield bash. So great. Like my dwarf had 2 attacks, right? It's a D14. So like you don't have as good of a chance to hit, but still awesome. But then the other thing that warriors and dwarfs get is what's called a deed die, which basically every roll you make for combat, you get to roll a 1d3 and you add that to your roll, right? So it's like, oh, if I rolled a 3, I get +3 to this attack and +3 to my damage. So Scory just turned into this like destroyer of everything because I was rolling really good, right? So I was hitting every time, and then I'd roll max damage with my longsword plus the like +2 damage or +3 damage. So he was doing 8 to 10 damage every single attack, just like mowing through enemies. And it was a ton of fun. And again, he didn't have a major strength. Right. So like you could have that fighter who's maybe not that strong, but you're getting really good deed die rolls and you're able to like still make an impact in that battle. Right. And like, it would have been fun. I'm sure at one point he's going to lose his longsword and have to use his lucky axe with -4 to my rolls, negating the deed die and making it nigh impossible. But like that would have been like the risk. Like he's a character that like I could have seen playing for a long time, eventually to like maybe find like some true lucky axe that like gives me extra luck or something, great. It would have been fun.
Scory, Doomvein, and Turd Surfer forever.
Yeah, and that deed die increases each time you level up. So at level 2, it's a D4. I believe at level 3, it's a D5. So it's like you're continuously getting that increase. Plus, also, I believe with warriors, you also get an increase to just your base attack modifier too as you level up. Similar to spellcasters get a base increase to their spell attack modifier and everything. And so I really think that it gives you that like ramp up to you're getting better and better at things as you go on without having to do the clumsy thing of, okay, go in and you level up 2 of your abilities by 2, or 1 of your abilities by 2 and another ability by 1. And, how can you sort of merge that together to do these things? It's like, those stats are just going to be stagnant. Well, unless you lose some of them by spending them. Those stats are going to be stagnant. Moving forward, it's just as you level up, you get these added bonuses. And it's really just how do you end up making use of those?
Another thing that I think makes this game stand out and potentially makes it shine is each different character class has different critical tables. So like if John is rolling his Scory and rolls a critical hit, he rolls a 20 on his die, he's going to roll off a table to do this awesome critical hit thing. If Harry Beanbag, my worthless wizard, rolls a 20 firing his longbow at an enemy, he's going to roll off a different and probably less effective critical table. And like I think that's a cool way of like rewarding the choice of being a warrior. So like I have awesome, phenomenal cosmic power at my fingertips that I'll never ever use because it's never applicable, but like that critical table could be the difference between life and death for the entire party.
AC, did you like the critical tables?
At first, no. But you know what? As we continued to play and I saw them evolve, like how they actually did come into play, I thought they actually did fit really well with this game and gave um a unique aspect for what we were doing. So no, the first time, yeah, when I rolled a crit and I'm like oh, well, part of it though, I think Joey, you said you did it wrong, right? Like you said you like there was something that you didn't do quite right, and you realized it the next day
Yeah.
when we played. So
Because I
was
had you roll a d20 again instead of you actually only get a d4 at level, or yeah, it might have even been a d3 at level 0 to roll onto the crit table. So you only get like the lowest spot of the crit table instead of like all of them, which get progressively crazier and crazier.
yeah. So and like what happened for me and why I was like, well, this is stupid because you know you're used to D&D where you roll a crit, you get the double damage die, you know, roll, and I, I critted. I can't remember what I rolled on the table, like what the effect was. I think I made him go prone, or I don't remember exactly, but like. I only did 1 damage, and I was like, I crit this thing. I should like, I should have done like, it's a pile of bones on the ground. This thing should be demolished. And I did 1 damage to it on a crit, and I was like, this is stupid.
And then Casey never played again. It was the weirdest thing. But like summarize for
I messed up them bones, man. I crushed a lot of the bones in that room after that. But
you saved my life. Thank you. So like to summarize for John and I, the combat was fun. The low level combat, there was a lot of like interesting stuff in it, particularly with like the magic being so mercurial. So that was fun from the player perspective. Burns, what was it like for you running those combat encounters for us?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. And granted, we were just basically playing like increasing, like it wasn't even really a boss rush. It was just like a monster rush where we played a couple of the things we fought against were from the first dungeon because I really wanted to give you guys an understanding since I knew that that was all we were going to be able to play before we recorded with the combat of okay, this we're going to fight like like 2 of the things that we fought in that dungeon so that you can get an idea of okay, this is how much stronger at level 1 we are than at level 0. And like those 2 things you guys mowed through. I don't even know if anybody took damage in those first 2 encounters against the piles of bones and then the snake demon thing. And then it was I threw some other things at like after that were a little bit more difficult, a little bit harder to hit, and had some weird abilities that you know, you guys had to figure out. One of the characters dropped, the cleric raised them again, but you know that was something that happened, and so you know, and I had an idea if we were going to keep going. I had another encounter that was going to come that was a little bit more difficult, but overall, I felt like the encounter and fighting process went really smoothly at the low levels of the game, especially at level 1. It feels like it clicked and went a lot faster than it does in D&D, and I think a lot of that's just because of the action die, where it's like in this game you get action dice, and that's basically how many actions you could do. So you can always move on your turn, and then for every action die you have, you can do another action. At level 0 and level 1, you really only have 1 action die, and so it helps to make things a lot better than at level 1 in D&D, people having all these bonus actions and all this stuff and trying to figure out, well, what can I do to maximize what I'm doing on my turn? And it just, I feel like it just helped things click a lot faster and get through that. Even though we had 6 player characters and at 1.7 enemies on the map, it still, I feel like, just went fast because it's just like, well, I really can't do anything this turn. I'm just going to move over here, and that's that. You know, it just made it a lot more apparent what it was that you could do or couldn't do.
Yeah, and having the 6 characters spread across like 2 players, that definitely sped things up because like we were all together, we surrounded the monsters, and we just wailed on them with our weapons. Like when we were doing the dungeon, like we were all split up and running in different directions. We call it tomming around in the industry. So like it was probably a lot easier having us all in the same room, like focused on the same targets. Dungeon Crawl Classics eschews heavy narratives in favor of action-packed adventures that focus on dungeon crawling, combat, and traps. We played roughly 12 hours over 3 sessions to prepare for the show. Casey, do you see the long-term appeal of the system?
For me, no. I could
Because we're all
definitely.
just sitting here giggling like,
Yeah, I mean, like it's no secret, right? Like long term, I would much rather play something else because, like I said, like I mentioned in the very beginning, I like to get invested into my characters, and in this game, it just seems like your characters are more than likely not going to live very long. So I don't really know, like, if there would be a long term, right? Because there's so many chaotic and negative things that can happen to your character, even like, as far as my two characters it was a wizard and an elf who were both magic users. So over the long term, if they survive, um, you add in corruption and all the other things that the game throws at you, eventually that character that you maybe liked is eventually going to completely morph into something different, which may be really cool. I guess, like if we continue to play this, I guess we'll find out. But for me, like I want the character that I create to stay on the path that I want it to be on. I don't want it to morph into something that I don't want it to be. And I would rather, if I'm going to put my time into it and do things, I want it to be something that I want it to evolve the way I want it to evolve. I don't want it to evolve based on a dice roll. Like I don't like randomness.
So you want control over your character's destiny. Like, that's fair. I get that. I can empathize with that line of thinking. Like, I feel like you prefer a sense or a feeling of progression based on like the modifiers going up in D&D. So like you get that compounding sense of power because the numbers keep going up. So like I get that, and like you're a big preparation person, and that is not a skill that translates into this game. So like I can see why this game wasn't for you. I kind of called it ahead of time. I'm like, well, Casey will probably hate this. Let's make sure that he does this show. So thank you for being a good sport and for rolling with it so long, my dude. John, what about you?
I mean, I do for sure, right? I think that this is a game of stories that happen kind of after the fact. I can see insane chaos created by the magic system. I love how this game forces you to be kind of creative and to role play, right? I do see Casey's point, right? I see where you have not necessarily what you want like your character to be as far as like the role playing aspect of what I'm going to say and do, but you have that idea of I'm starting out to be a paladin and these are the skills and the tools and the things that he's going to do, and you want to be able to pick that and grow with that. I think this system does a really good job of actually creating things about your character that then forces you to make those hard choices where it's going to say, your luck is super low, so you're going to have to do this with your character. Or you cast the spell and it did this and it's irreversible, so now you're going to have to decide how you deal with that for the rest of the campaign. And like those things that happen, whether it's like, yeah, I can never cast Magic Missile again unless it is like, dire straits, right? Or I summon the demon that's going to destroy us all, right? I might end up killing one of my teammates because of something I do inadvertently. Like those are cool things to me as far as like telling a story. And like, yeah, Tom said it, like, the dice don't lie, right? It just does create a different type of game that you're going to get from D&D.
Yeah, I think from what we've experienced, from the little bit that we went through, and from like what I've read of like reading through a couple level 0 adventures and looking into a couple level 1 adventures a bit, um, the way I'd like to put it is that to me, a lot of other D&D or a lot of other role playing systems like D&D are a lot more like exposition heavy. So it's a lot about this is the background of everything. This is like the setup to the adventure that you're about to go on. And some of that would be in there for like the level 1 adventure a little bit, as you're venturing out to try to accomplish something, because those are longer than the level 0 adventures and there's a lot more kind of to them from a setup standpoint. But I feel like in D&D, the first like couple sessions of a D&D campaign and Pathfinder and a lot of those other things is like setting up the world and setting up all these other things. And you could do that a little bit with this, but I feel like the focus of this is a lot more on like emergent storytelling. And so what is it that happens in the game and how does that like color things moving forward? I feel like so it's kind of like the difference between storytelling in say The Witcher 3 where you have this really finely crafted world, this super intricate story with all these really like defined NPCs that you're interacting with as a player character. That's like D&D. Whereas I feel like Dungeon Crawl Classics is a lot like more like GTA, where a lot of the fun that you have, sure, there's going to be some of those set piece story bits that happen, but a lot of the fun that happens is in the random things that you stumble across in the world that it's like, I can't believe that this happened and I can't believe I was able to pull this off. Like I jumped this semi truck over these 3 different things and landed over here. I feel like it leans more into that type of storytelling. And then I think the one thing I would focus on if I was running this again is just trying to push characters or players into leaning into some of that a little bit more with their characters. And it's like, if this character ended up like, even though they sucked at a certain ability, like figuring out this really intricate puzzle, well, they're smart enough to be a wizard then, and just like see what happens when you maybe don't have a lot of intelligence, but you're trying to be a wizard and just play around with it, and maybe you'll get lucky and keep being like this insane caster, even though you're not the smartest person in the world. And I feel like it's also a system, and I'm sure there's people that love this system and take it super seriously, but it feels like the type of system where you're better off approaching it from a little bit more of a like MacGruber, where it's like, let's just see what happens, right? It's not that I'm not planning. It's just we're just gonna see what happens. Let's see what happens. And then and just like the more you roll with stuff and the more that you let that snowball build, I think the more interesting it is. And even though this person might go out in a blaze of glory or the equivalent of a wet fart, at least that's the arc that character had. And I'll have another character that hopefully I can keep moving with that has a different story that I can keep evolving forward. So I don't know. That's, I think, how I see the game. Is it something that it's like, this is the only game I'm ever going to play anymore? Yeah, probably not. But
yeah, definitely not. And like D&D is super accessible. And they've been developing multiple editions to make it more and more accessible over time. And like, that's great. Like, I believe that just about anyone can jump into D&D and have fun. Dungeon Crawl Classics is a different beast. I do not believe that everybody can jump into DCC and have a good time. Casey's Exhibit 1A in that front. But like, for people who can just embrace the chaos, like, I always think of my friend Duhau, and like, Duhau has always been loyal to the dice to a fault in Dungeons and Dragons. And like, as a DM, it was this critical failure because like sometimes you gotta let the party live, and like you gotta just lie about what the number is, and like he can't do that. So I think like DCC is a game for Duhau, and I think it would be a fun experience to like have some drinks. I don't tend to drink much when playing role-playing games because of like past experience and how it drags down the gameplay, but I think this is a game that you can have some drinks and like get caught up in the moment and like, oh, we got a 24. Oh, John ripped all our souls out. Great, game over. Everybody go home. But I do see the long-term appeal, and like if this game is just jumping into dungeons, fighting some monsters, and leveling up, I'm all for it. I love that stuff, man. And like, not everything has to be a big, super thinky like meta thing. Like, I just like fighting monsters, dude.
And escaping traps, dealing with big fire statues.
Yeah, can we just have every room be a monster closet, please, forever? Burns, you played a lot of D&D 5th edition. You also DM multiple campaigns. You've talked a lot about the experience of running Dungeon Crawl Classics for it. But like, how is it different from D&D, and like, what is the commitment if somebody wants to start a campaign of Dungeon Crawl Classics?
So I mean, the first time running any system is really tricky. Like I said before, you could read through the rule book a zillion times and think you understand it, but until you actually like play a game and start going through the experience, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And so it really takes that time to sort of figure out that experience of going through it to figure out, oh, okay, this is the stuff I need to know. This is the stuff I need to get right in my head. And so you really need that experience of figuring that out by just going through it to be able to do that. I think level zero adventures help a little bit because they are quite a bit more straightforward. I feel like they had a different feel than like the open encounters of a D&D campaign from what I've experienced, which is good. The fact that it because playing level one in Dungeons and Dragons is a very scary experience because you have so little health that it doesn't take long for you to get in a really bad situation and feel like, oh crap, this is going to be a TPK as a DM. Because you really don't want to do that. Like you spent all this time creating characters, and then it's like, huh, oops, this monster closet of goblins really did kill you all. So
Better roll a new face, Casey.
yeah. And so I knowing that, oh, okay, people are going to die here. I still had that feeling coming in where it's like, oh crap, it just as attached as you guys get to some of your characters, like I get attached to some of your characters too, and it's just like, oh,
who did you love more, Turd Surfer or Harry Beanbag?
They both had their quirks. I was bummed when Maggie Mozzarella died too, because I'd grown an affinity for her as we were going through the dungeon. The people that died to the statue, like barely anything had happened with those characters, so it was a little bit harder. But the characters that like had kind of survived up until that point, I felt bad that the ones that died like dropped like right near the end, a little bit too. So that was something that was tricky. But I think, I mean, if you have never DM'd anything before and we're going to run this, I don't know if I'd recommend running a system like this first. I feel like having a bit of experience in another system would make you better at running this. And if you wanted to DM and it's like I really wanted to try, honestly, the 5.5 ed, so the 2024 rule books for Dungeons and Dragons is probably the best, like training someone how Dungeons and Dragons works. And then the DM guide for the 2024 rule books too is the same way. They went above and beyond in those books at like, this is what it means to be a DM. This is what it means to be a player. This is how to run a campaign. Like that was the whole focus of the DM's guide was like, we're going to give you all these different tools and all the tables that you're going to need to roll. But also we're going to sort of handhold you through like how to create a world, how to create an encounter, how to play NPCs and stuff like that. Like they went through a lot of work to try to make DMing more accessible because they know that that's the DMs are the people that buy the books. The DMs are the people that buy more things. So from a business standpoint, it makes more sense, but it's just good for the hobby as well, for people to be able to understand and have like an easy entry point into that. So if someone was going to be DMing for the first time, I'd recommend that. I think if you've run a lot of other systems, I think you'd have fun running this. But I think coming in, like I know there's a lot of things that I would do differently approaching this another time if we were going to create another campaign, or if we were going to continue this campaign. It's like there's certain things that it's like I know that I want to try to focus on a little bit better. And
yeah,
so
me too. I'd focus on my names. That's point one.
But I think it's one of those things where I feel like this is a good like palate cleanser type of RPG experience. And it's one of those things where I've never played anything prior to 5th ed D&D really. I guess I technically played a little bit of Pathfinder first edition, which is like 3.5e. So I have a little bit of experience of what that's like. but like John was saying, this is very much more like second edition and earlier Dungeons and Dragons. And so for me, it felt like a little bit of experiencing the history of what role playing was, even though I didn't play things back then. And so it was a breath of fresh air from that perspective, and just like the little bit different way that it handles some of the things and the sort of changing of the dice depending on things. It took a little while to get used to, like, when should I be knocking dice down or up. But I feel like I have a better handle of that now that I've DM'd a little bit more of it too. So yeah, I would recommend, if people have been DMing for a while, to give it a shot. If the game system sounds interesting to you, I think it's worth it, and it's really accessible. Like, the 496 page rule book is $30 to buy. The soft cover version, with each copy of the game, you get a free PDF, which I need to like email them to get my free PDF copy because I must have lost the code that came with the book. So yeah, so Goodman Games is really good about that. And then the module is $30 on the website also. So, or on Roll20. So.
And I'm glad that you mentioned Roll20. The last thing that I want to talk about is the platform that we played on. We live in 2 different states at the moment. Roll20 is a digital platform that houses your character sheets, holds the game rules, rolls your dice, and shows you a virtual version of the tabletop, slowly revealing more information as you open doors and equip light on your characters. So, John, how well did Roll20 work for our multi-state game?
I mean, it was okay, right? Like, nothing amazing. It kind of had that free level of polish, right? There's definitely some jank. It reminded me a lot of like when we played what's the
Tabletop Simulator?
Tabletop Simulator, thank you. Right? Where it's like, yeah, once you understand it and you get the vibe and you know to click on this before you do that, and to click on this before you do that and do this, then you are moving quickly. And I think that comes with any system. It's funny, like, it reminds me of like Fantasy Grounds that I used like 16 years ago to play like a 3.5 D&D campaign in a similar situation with a bunch of people all over the US. So the technology has not changed all that much. It would be, I'd love to like see how, you know, D&D Beyond or something else plays, to see if like it's a little better, a little smoother, and see what, you know, the bells and whistles of a paid system bring.
I thought it was mostly a delight, dude. Like, clicking on a thing on your character sheet and having all the modifiers added was just great. I loved how it laid out the grid on the table, burns at tokens and like maps, and like I thought it was a great experience, except for when it didn't work for the 1 hour that we had played. Casey, did you have any thoughts on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it did a really job. I think by the third playing session, after using it those first couple times, it was a little bit wonky, just trying to get used to, all right, where do I click? What do I do? Like, how do I get back to this? You know, that sort of thing. But by the third time, like, having it figured out, it ran a lot smoother. And like you said, it just it made things a little bit more streamlined. Like, I think if you were doing it in person,
Like we will in like a month, right, guys? Right?
yeah, right, yeah. No, like, it would've, I don't know, like, I think it did a really good job. I think it would've just kind of slogged it down even more. Like, I think it kind of did streamline things a little bit more. Just, like, by rolling everything for you and putting everything in there, it just sped the whole process up, which I appreciated, since we had a limited amount of time to play anyways.
Yeah, I mean, so I've had the paid version of, or well, the first tier of the pro version of Roll20 for a few years now. Main reason I have that, well, you get like free stuff, which is nice, which is why I've had so many of the tokens, or partially why I had so many of those tools. I so the looking at Dungeons Crawl Classics specifically in the module. So basically, how Roll20 works is you'll buy like a module or a game system, and then basically getting those rule books allow you to put that into the game so everybody can see all the things in the compendium. So same with like D&D, you can load in a bunch of those different modules to have like the monsters and everything from all those different modules available within there. There was some quirks that took a little bit to figure out how some of the things worked with the Dungeon Crawl Classic stuff that came in. But once I kind of figured that out, it worked pretty well. There are some pieces that weren't quite fully fleshed out on like the character sheets. So, if, like for instance, the halflings, their whole thing is that they have an innate ability to be able to use a weapon in each hand. And the way that that works is instead of rolling a d20, you get to roll 2 attacks, one with each of them, and you're rolling d16s on each of those attacks. But if you roll a 16 on a d16, that's still a critical hit. Even though for everybody else, you have to roll a d20. You have to roll a d20 you have to roll a 20 on a d20 to get a critical hit. And so, but they didn't have anything in there with the halflings to be able to have that in there. So I had to create a macro for that. So if Casey would play with Munster Stone Hands again, I have that built so that we can do that.
I think it's unlikely. I think you wasted time in that one, Burns.
Well, it's mostly just to sort of figure out how to do it. And that's like the other thing with like running games on Roll20. So some things are easier to run things on a virtual tabletop than in person. And some things are easier to run in person than on a virtual tabletop. The thing that's really nice, and especially with like the D&D modules, those are like extremely plug and play. So they're going to give you the map of every single area. They're going to give you, well, at least every area that has a map in the book. They're going to give you all the like monsters and NPCs built out so that you can easily add them into the map. A lot of the times in the maps, they'll actually already be on like the GM layer so that you can bring them up. And they'll have all of the dynamic lighting built on everything so that it's really easy to be able to run things kind of quickly. There's a lot of aspects though of running things on Roll20 that are really complicated to set up if they're not automatically set up. And there's a lot of things that like once you go through an area, to reset the darkness is like really overly complicated, I feel like, and I haven't really mastered some of that stuff yet. Um, in person, it's so much easier to just like, roll the dice you have and have the books in front of you. You have to flip to the pages instead of like trying to search for the rule in the compendium and so on and so forth. But coming up with the maps and printing those out and having those in however it is that you want to make them playable, if you're using miniatures and everything like that, takes a significant amount more time than if you just have that sort of innately in Roll20, or even to an extent if you're pulling a map into there and just resizing it and setting up the grid yourself. There's the pluses and minuses kind of each way with running things on there. Thankfully, coming into this, I had experience with running stuff on Roll20 that I was able to use to make it work pretty well, and it was serviceable. But yeah, I think the difficulty with this system is that a lot of it, especially earlier on, is not sort of built to have 15 character models running around doing things. So a lot of it's just trying to find ways to make that as efficient as possible when you're going through it.
Yeah, so the moral of the story is don't move to Indiana, John. There you go. Hey. All right,
now
we'll close down.
Amazing return, so it's okay.
We'll close down the show with our final thoughts in this way. Dungeon Crawl Classics feels very different tonally from modern D&D. It's grimy, weird, and frankly kind of mean. John, did that tone work for you?
It did, right? I had a great time. I've played homebrew and loved that back in the day. And, unlike Arcanum, this game has the right amount of jank to be a good old game that I'll want to keep playing.
Arcanum was great, man. Just do all the stuff that Mike said. Not Mike, Darren. Sorry, wrong mathwig. This game is weird, man. I dig it. Like, I definitely want to play this again sometime. Like, maybe reset and like redo the character funnel from level 0. Maybe do it in person. I don't know, but like, I think there's a future for this game. Casey, do you have a final thought on Dungeon Crawl Classics?
I like the dungeon crawl part. They're just running through the dungeon with the character and interacting with the different traps and the different environments and trying to figure things out. I really, really like that aspect and that part of it, but not being able to control really how my characters evolve and what I do with it is like that part's just not really for me. Yeah, go
I have
ahead,
a
Tom.
solution, man. We'll just black out all your character stats, and so like the DM will be able to see them. You won't, and it won't drive you crazy, dude. And like you'll just roll the dice, things will happen, and like we'll have a hoot.
Yeah, that is kind of fair. And I could honestly like I was trying to think of a scenario like this seems like it could be something like you could play this like a party almost, like you'd have to try to figure out like a way like maybe have like all 15 character sheets like pre-created and then you just like hand them out to if you got 15 people at your party like each person takes one and like you just send them into the dungeon like that would be kind of a wild experience, right? Because then like nobody's invested in that character and like but the playing of the game itself is actually pretty fun other than like you have to explain like all right half of you are going to die and then you're just going to be sitting around drinking and doing whatever but like
Hey Pat, why
like
don't you go in there first?
right. Like,
Dungeon
wants to
Crawl
walk through the door
Classic.
first?
A Dungeon Crawl Classic or Fantasy League, right? That's what we need. Where you're drafting your guys, and then you play out, and you like get points for like when you like this is the guy that I think is gonna die. He's gonna make it. He's gonna get the most kills. That's where it's at. So we would play them out, but everyone there would basically process through and like have their fantasy league about our characters.
The Dungeon Crawl Classics Deadpool, like putting your bets on who's going to die first and who's going to survive. And
I'm telling you, this is our claim to fame, right? We could be like,
you
all these crazy
Trademark.
D&D players, right? We're going to do this, and we're going to start a new thing, and that's what's going to happen right there.
Trademark pending. Nobody can steal that.
You'll see it first on the official OiO YouTube channel. Bernsey, any closing thoughts as you own Dungeon Crawl Classics and suggested that we play it for the show?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as a palate cleanser. I mean, we had the conversation when we first talked about it, Tom, that we had a feeling that Casey was not going to jive with it very well.
And hey, don't shatter the illusion that I don't plan for this show, man. Like, I have a persona that I maintain here, dude.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was on the Tom and Joey Unfiltered after when we talked about Adepticon and we said that we were going to play this instead of Final Fantasy 14 RPG. So it actually is like recorded. Like all the planning we did basically for it was there.
Yeah, and people pay $10 a month for the right to hear that, dude. So like, don't give away my chatter here, man.
I'm trying to sell more memberships. If you want to hear some of that, you got to pony up the cash. But no, I did enjoy this as a palate cleanser. It was something that, hearing it described and, reading through some of the rules and stuff, like I really wanted to just sort of see how it would work. And so it was really good to run through that experience with it, and kind of learn that and figure that out. And so, yeah, I'd recommend it to people if it sounded interesting and sounded fun. Find a way to give it a shot. All the stuff can be bought in PDF form or physically. I think a lot of the stuff's on Amazon. Some game stores would have it, I would assume. Otherwise,
Goodman Games also has a web store.
Yeah, Goodman Games has a web store, so buying everything through them. And like I said, if you buy stuff physically, either from like a local game store or from Goodman Games, you'll get like the ability to get a PDF copy of anything that you buy physically. So, that's helpful too. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It just really is trying to set up like what the experience is going to be. And for me, I'm like the opposite of a min-maxer. And so I the system kind of jives with me from that perspective. Though I do, from a role-playing perspective, I really like to create characters with very specific identities or gimmicks. And so not having the ability to do that as a player would be something that would be not as interesting to me. But just trying to lean into this is the story that develops as the game goes on with the characters, I think seems like it would be a fun experience also. So yeah. I don't know. I'm excited by it. I'm interested in it. I'm interested in messing around with it more in the future if people are interested in doing that at some point.
And if you're the opposite of a min-maxer, does that make you a max miner?
Something like that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're going to end the show with that humdinger, guys. That does it for our delve into Dungeon Crawl Classics. Next month, Phoenix, Brian, and I are discussing the animated series Batman, the Caped Crusader. We'll drop part 2 of our Game Club discussion on the second half of Assassin's Creed Origins in the middle of the month. We hope you'll jump in, play the game with us, and share your thoughts on the OiO Discord. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Outside is Overrated. Please review us on your favorite podcast platform and support our show on Patreon at patreon.com/OiO. For John at Not on the Internet, for Casey at Dr_Casey on X, and for Joey at HobbyBoxBurns on X and twitch.tv/HobbyBoxBurns. I'm Tom Sidlogic at Tom Sidlogic OiO. We'll talk to you next month. Stay inside, kids.